Hello everyone, welcome to the 144th episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. Today a kind of special episode because I'm addressing you from the European Parliament where we had a conference on Beyond Growth that is on 3 days. It's the 5th edition and it's all about going beyond growth. Obviously it's the title of the conference, but it's weird obviously to use a term that you want to move beyond or transcend and referring to it in your conference. So, I joke a bit in saying, it's like organizing a conference in the 18th century on post-monarchy or beyond monarchy. And then you have various intellectual speakers and whatnot that give presentations on demonarchization or post-monarchy or sustainable monarchy, whatever that is, or benevolent monarchy. But none of these is democracy. None of these really amounts to a real system change. Now, during the conference, they did propose an alternative term, which is sufficiency, the idea that you use only the resources which are absolutely required or necessary. But I'll explain why that's also not a very suitable term. So the first thing I wanted to say is to give, to do something and just like go with the flow. So look at this. Did you notice what just happened? Let me do it again. So what I just did is I scratched my nose. And there's a group of unicellular organisms here that are on the desk that I'm sitting at. And they are just holding a conference denouncing my wasteful energy. Because imagine how much energy it represents to move an entire arm, which is about 4 or 5 kilograms worth of bones and tissue and cells and all that stuff, just to scratch my nose, which is really a pointless action. It serves no purpose, really no benefit, just a whim. And that energy for them, for that collective of unicellular organisms on this bench, represents maybe a year's worth of energy. They could live off that energy for maybe even a generation or something. So why should I be entitled to consume that kind of energy? Or even just go like this. Look, I'm spending energy. It's terribly inefficient. Doing things for no purpose, no reason. The reason why I can do that without, batting a lid or shedding a tear is because I am a global functioning organism that has reached a very high efficiency in metabolizing, oxygen and energy. And because I have managed to harmonize the relationships within this boundary, which is my skin, inside my body, my cells are basically in paradise and they get to do whatever the hell they want. I mean, I can take this body and dance with it. I can do whatever I want. I mean, dancing, for instance, quite pointless, terrible waste of energy. If you think about it. Serves no real purpose, just maybe socialization. I mean, maybe we can find a more efficient dance where you minimize your movements and you just achieve the same kind of social benefits without all the unnecessary wasteful movements. All joking aside though, these unicellular organisms that were just announcing me scratching my nose, they have a very poor use of energy because they spend a lot of energy fighting between themselves, competing, eating each other. There's just so much energy that is used to protect themselves from others in this kind of state of separation. Whereas once you're in a state of unity or harmony, collectively, the energy efficiency just skyrockets and you can afford to do things that are quote unquote useless. Now there's many other examples, for instance, of why this kind of approach of degrowth or sustainable development is very problematic right now, the way we deal with it as humanity. I could summarize every single conference on sustainable development by saying it's always, the first part is we are bad, and then you have, humanity is bad, and then you have a whole bunch of, graphs saying just how terrible of creatures we are, all the harm we've done to this planet, to the ecosystem, to everything, which is, true in a certain sense. And then you have a whole bunch of presentations following that saying, how can we be good? How can we repent for our sins? And so that we get the planet Mother Earth's forgiveness for being so bad. And then after that, like a series of propositions and recommendations. And then after that, we can live in tiny houses and cycle on bicycles for the next 5 billion years until the sun explodes and the end. So there's no real future vision. It's more like a kind of survival for survival's sake, but no profundity in terms of, why are we here? Existential questions. What is humanity supposed to do? No future vision. Just like, okay, we just need to survive. And to do that, we need to curtail our consumption to the most amount possible, because otherwise we're all doomed, blah, blah, blah. Now I have other kinds of metaphors here to propose that are really illustrative of why that's a problem of having this kind of monolithic view of growth versus degrowth. A seed, for instance, when it germinates, it produces a tremendous amount of energy to do that. And germination is the moment where the most amount of energy is kind of spent. That first, sprouting, and then energy sort of, levels off. Now imagine if, in order to level off, the individual cells of the plant held a series of conferences to self-flagellate themselves and say, oh my God, we were so evil. We spent all that energy to germinate. Oh, that was terrible, a terrible use of resources. Now we need to repent and spend less energy moving forward and growing forward as a plant. I would say that's a wasteful kind of resource in itself, to spend all that energy in self-flagellation when this germination process and then the leveling off is just a natural process of how a plant grows. It's just the way it develops. Then there's another kind of metaphor, like the baby's metabolism, for instance. I do the comparison time and again of the fact that humanity developed on this planet much like a fetus inside the womb of a mother, Mother Earth in this instance. Now, we had our exponential growth phase, which is the same way that a baby grows inside the womb, and everything just sort of mirrors back to this. We're also peeing inside the uterus of this planet. We're also, maybe even we let out our first feces inside this planetary womb, which is called the meconium in a baby's case. And in that case, the baby, it's very dangerous because the baby can suffocate and poison itself eating its own feces. Now, that describes very poetically the situation that we're in as humanity, at risk of poisoning ourselves in our own feces, in our own excrements, which is all the pollution, the plastics and the landfills and all that stuff, nuclear waste, CO2, whatever, pollution. And towards the end of pregnancy, the mother's, the placenta and the amniotic fluid, all of that becomes more and more sort of more pee than amniotic fluid, because it's just the mother cannot renew the resources available to the baby. And the baby starts also functioning and drawing more and more resources, which leads to plenty of problems. Like the mother can have deficiencies in certain minerals and whatever, maybe lithium in this case, or aluminium, or ore or whatever. But what's the solution? What's the solution in this case? The baby should squeeze the umbilical cord to let only filter a tiny little stream of blood, so that it doesn't take too much from its mother, and only swallow the amount of amniotic fluid that the placenta can actually recycle, and then stay in that kind of stasis, for the next 10, 20, 30 years, curled up in the womb, not moving, minimizing movements, being really, really, really energy efficient. Obviously, that's not the point. The point is birth. And if you look at the graph of what post-growth economists are calling for, it's this kind of S-curve. You have exponential growth, capitalism, industrial revolution, and then it has to sort of level off and then, trail out into infinity, just like, remaining at the same level. But nobody's really agreeing on how that S-curve should be achieved. Now, put the graph of the development of a baby inside the womb and then a graph of a baby's weight and development once outside the womb, and it is an S-curve. It develops exponentially, and then after birth, the growth of the baby sort of levels off. A baby doesn't multiply or put on weight at the same speed as inside the womb. Otherwise, we'd all weigh like 10 tons or something. And that's a natural process, but it only happens after birth, and it only happens on the condition that the baby functions like one global collective organism and not like a misassembled puzzle, which is the state of humanity right now, which to me is the biggest obstacle. We're like a biological chimera. So a chimera is this kind of, artificially constructed biological creature. And the energy that is required to maintain chimerical biological structures alive is tremendous compared to an actual stable, multicellular organism such as a human body. So just like imagine like a Frankenstein kind of body with misassembled parts that you kind of, artificially bring into or make come alive. The energy necessary to keep it alive is insane. And you can see the same thing happening right now with many structures that we've built as humanity, whether it's our governments, our institutions, our companies, our economic, political systems, our financial systems. They're all kind of chimeric structures that require a tremendous energy in terms of not just electrical energy, but even human energy to maintain them from crumbling. And so that is a real issue. And it's all part of evolution, basically. Like a 7-month-old baby isn't yet ready. The more organs are not mature enough for him to be able to survive in the outer reality without that kind of protective, barrier that is the womb. And that's, like premature babies, basically, they would die off if they didn't have artificial support, life support. And the same is valid for humanity. We don't function yet like one big collective global organism. We still have like wars like between Russia and Ukraine. So that's like almost like if your liver was fighting against your stomach. So you can't remain alive very, very long if your internal organs are fighting between each other. And the amount of energy you consume is also tremendously increased. So if you have an internal war going on inside your body consumes a lot of energy to try to maintain you alive and to heal. So that's definitely something that needs to be addressed, but probably not via the kind of degrowth solution. It's more something more metaphysical, I'd say, even to rekindle with big questions like why the hell are we here in the first place, and rekindle with harmony as a principle. And this is also something that it's a natural process that should be espoused rather than something that should be this kind of heroic struggle of humanity trying to become more efficient by this hero's journey kind of rationale. This obsession with overcoming difficulty and challenges, which are sometimes self-inflicted just because we're obsessed with this kind of hero's journey paradigm or model. A baby, for instance, spends a tremendous amount of energy to play with a toy, just to touch a toy, for instance, where you can pick up objects seamlessly and manipulate them and all that stuff. A baby has to learn that painstakingly and waste a lot of energy in the process. So it's a natural process of metabolisms in biology to achieve kind of maximum efficiency, of wasting the least amount of energy. When you walk from point A to point B as an adult, you don't go stray along and get distracted by a lot of things. You just go straight with the most energy efficient kind of trajectory. Now, if you look at a child, for instance, they'll just completely stray off course. So their energy use is very poor in that sense. They don't have this kind of optimal thinking. And for humanity, the global scale, it's exactly the same kind of process that we're seeing, is that we are in a process of optimizing our global metabolism as humanity. That is like, I would even say it's like a metabolization of ideas into the physical sort of realm that we live in. So as I explained in my other videos, the human is the bridge between the immaterial and the material, we have the power to manifest ideas, to materialize ideas via our collective actions. So, for instance, democracy, you can't really touch democracy. It's not something tangible. It's an etheric kind of concept. But via the collective action of millions and millions and millions of people, it can actually take physical form as institutions, as parliaments, as bodies of law, texts, and all kinds of other things. We also materialize cars, we materialize computers. So that's what humans do. We are the bridge between the material world and the immaterial world of abstract concepts, thoughts, ideas. But you can metabolize that. You can do that process in a sustainable way, or in a kind of very chaotic and terrible way. And that is what actually has to be sustainable, or what has to be worked on. Not this kind of growth, degrowth, which is very black and white, very poor kind of conceptual ways of thinking about this. So the hero's journey, it's this obsession with the dramatic. So I don't know if you know the series, it's really hilarious. It's How It Should Have Ended. And you look at Lord of the Rings, for instance, and instead of having, Frodo walk into Mordor and, go on a crazy adventure, they just have Aragorn and some other people of the Fellowship of the Ring distract Sauron by, taunting him. And then Gandalf flies Frodo with an eagle right above Mount Doom, and then drops the ring of power into the lava, and that's it, the end. And obviously nobody would go see that movie. But that's one of the big problems that humanity is facing right now, is this obsession with heroism. And we just want to have an epic kind of, adventure here of like, oh, we're about to kill ourselves, but right at the nick of time, in the last very minute, we're going to save ourselves with this like collective kind of, awakening of people that will suddenly behave sustainably. But wow, we really came close. I mean, it was, thrilling and enticing and everything. And as you listen to many speakers, many people or whatever, they do play the role of, they want to have this kind of role of the hero, or this kind of adventure of being the academic that denounces the establishment, or being the rebel, youngster that's going to, protest in the street and fight against and run away from violent cops and abusive power struggle system, whatever. But it's kind of artificial if you think about it. It's almost as if we're throwing wrenches at each other to overcome each other through this kind of opposition. But it's a lot of wasted energy and not really achieving the goal that we want to achieve. So growth versus degrowth, sufficiency. I don't like these terms because they just don't reflect the nature of things. If you look at nature, it's more a question of adequacy. I prefer the term adequacy. That is, when you look at a baby and you see it that it's struggling to grab a toy and it's wasting all that energy doing it, you still think it's adequate, because you say, okay, that's just the level of development of that baby. It's just a natural development phase, right? Now, if you see an adult doing it, you might think, what the hell is he doing? This is so weird. Can't you just grab the thing? I mean, so it's more an adequate kind of thing than a sufficiency. Sufficiency implies this kind of notion of only use the resources that are absolutely, strictly necessary for your very survival and basic needs. Whereas nature actually is more of a thriving force, an expanding force. It expands wherever it can, and then, when it faces limits, then it adjusts. And your bodies are very good at doing this. For instance, if you need to run, you're going to consume about 7 times as much oxygen as when you're sitting down. But when you sit down, then the energy level consumption drops naturally. Now, our societies, because we're still kind of in the womb of this planet, we're still in our developmental phase, our systems are not equipped to tolerate fluctuations in energy consumption. The current systems we have in place, and that's a taboo that is never talked about, and not even in these types of conferences, is that the growth model, we have it because it's imperative. Otherwise, the whole financial system would implode, because without growth, you can't service the interest on debt. And a debt-based monetary system is perfect to actually push artificial, quick development when you need to. So it's great. At a certain point, it's great, up to a certain point, and then you have to switch to another system where you, a system that affords this kind of fluctuations, natural fluctuations, where maybe at some point, maybe 10 years from now, humanity will have to consume a tremendous amount of resources. We're gonna consume a lot of resources all at once. And then for the next 30 years, then nothing will happen, and we can actually chill, and the global collective organism of humanity will actually just be resting or whatever, and then our consumption level will diminish drastically. And our current systems are just not geared to support that kind of fluctuations, and a kind of organic fluctuation where it's not about growth or degrowth, it's just about what's good at a certain point in time, which cannot be rationalized or predicted or modeled, or just like you during your day, you can't exactly predict how much energy you need at a certain point in time. Maybe you need to run to catch your train. Maybe you can go there, strolling easily and cozily and everything. And that's just based on a necessity that you can't predict well in advance. So I think that's also the priority, is to think about systems which tolerate or are geared towards this kind of natural fluctuation in energy consumption, resource consumption, and all that stuff. And also to understand that the physical or natural kind of barriers or limits to resources that we think we are exposed to here, well, that's like, imagine if like inside a baby there were few cells that were really scientifically minded, and did all these calculations saying, okay, so this is the amount of resources that we have in this womb, and this is the boundary. We need to stay within that boundary of all those, the available resources. They measure, how much resources stream through the umbilical cord. They measure the amount of resources that the placenta can, renew by recycling the amniotic fluid. And they say, okay, now we need to stay in here in that donut, Fine. I don't know of a single woman that would say, hey, I would love to stay pregnant for 20 years. At some point, you're like, please, make this baby come out. Please, just, So the whole point is we might access a tremendous amount of, maybe unlimited amount of resources once on the other side of the veil, once we function as a global collective organism, as humanity. People are talking about nuclear fusion and, pulling energy from the void via some kind of quantum quirks or whatever, but it doesn't really matter. Right now, as you're breathing in and breathing out as a human, you have access from the point of view of your cells to infinite and unlimited energy, and clean energy as well. But that requires your internal functioning to be harmonious, and not your cells to behave like we're behaving currently, where countries are fighting between each other, like, if your internal organs were busy fighting each other. So it's not about staying within the boundaries, the fixed boundaries of the resources of this planet for the next 5 billion years until the sun blows up, and living in our caves and leave the environment alone. It's about reaching the necessary conditions to form a global collective organism by behaving, in this kind of harmonious fashion, and combining all the different body parts of humanity, let's say, in a way that makes sense, that is coherent and harmonious, and then we'll be able to access resources that we thought we'd never have. Failure to do that will behave like WALL-E, basically. It's the WALL-E kind of narrative, where it's like the WALL-E movie, where if you have access to infinite energy, but you remain in the current state of human consciousness of consumerism and stuff, then yes, we will transform this planet into a giant heap of garbage. But that's not the point. The point is to reach a certain, level of harmony in our functioning where we use that energy for, something very specific and relevant. Just like what you're doing with your body right now. Don't you think that your cells, deserve that kind of energy that allow you to walk around and do all these things? So again, adequacy rather than sufficiency, and answering bigger existential questions like why are we here? What's the purpose of humans? We are kind of like the manifestation of the planet's intelligence and consciousness. So imagine the story of this planet without humans. It's just a pointless cyclical story of life that expands until it reaches a sort of a limit, and then a cataclysm occurs, a reversal of magnetic poles, an asteroid falls from the sky, or something happens, 99 or 95% of life dies, and then you repeat. And that's just the pointless circular story, but throw humans in the mix and suddenly that story can lead somewhere. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and talk to you in the next video. Bye.